Hi everyone. I'm joined by our good friend, Professor John Swinton. John is a world-renowned practical theologian. He's someone that has really influenced Sanctuary's work, and he's also an ambassador for Sanctuary. John is based in Aberdeen. He's the Chair of Divinity at the University of Aberdeen, and he joins us today. Hi, John.
Hi, Dan. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. John, I have a question for you today, and it's really one question that I'd love to get your thoughts on. And the question is born out of this idea that at this time where many people are struggling with their identity, I guess we'd say, because in the West, I live in Canada, you live in Scotland, but in our cultures, much of our value is tied to what we do and what we can produce. And so many of my friends at the moment who are unable to work or are at home or struggling to work at home, are having a really hard time. Their mental health is suffering, and they're kind of being confronted with this idea of, I think I'm too defined by what I do. I wonder, are there other ways of, how do we frame this? Are there other worldviews? Are there other ways of looking at personhood and the value of persons beyond this sort of Western mindset?
I think there are, and I think the first thing to think about certainly in relation to value, is that value is always a gift. So you don't become valuable on your own. You always have to be given value by somebody else. And that's the case not just for human beings, but for things as well. So take something like a wedding ring. So a wedding ring in itself, unless you're a very wealthy person, probably doesn't cost a lot of money. But the value that a couple put on it makes it invaluable, right? So the value emerges from the importance of the object for the individual. And it's the same with human beings. Our value doesn't come from ourselves and what we do, although culturally we think that it does or feel that it does. Actually, our value comes from the gifts that other people have given to us, of looking at us and valuing us, ultimately valuing us in relation to God. And I'll come back to that in a second. But even if you're successful in your job, you only really get value if other people think you're successful. So you can have all the money in the world that you want, but if everybody else hates you and everybody else devalues what you do, then the chances are you're not going to feel very valuable. But for most of us, even your work, even the value you get from your work involves other people giving you that value. I think that one way in which we can rethink the issue of value is to go back to the contemplative tradition within Christianity and within other religions as well, where the mystics would go out into the desert and they wear hair shirts or go up in pillars or do whatever they do to get away from their reason and to get to as close to the love of God as possible, so that they can come to a stage where they love God simply for God's sake and recognize that God loves them simply for their sake. And it seems to me that the heart of the gospel emerges into that contemplative tradition. What we discover in the life of Jesus and the gifts of friendship that Jesus gives to the vulnerable and the marginalized is that love means being loved for who you are and learning how to love God just for who God is. Not for what you want God to do for you, not for what you hope God will do in the future, but to learn how to love God just for who you are, because that's exactly the way that God loves you. And so if we have that kind of perspective and value and identity, then even when we're failures in our work or failures in the things that we seek to achieve, we actually still have our value, we still have our identity, and we still have fresh possibilities for the future, for the present and the future.
That's great. Thank you, John. That's just put so well. And it strikes me as ironic that just as those desert fathers who would remove themselves from the culture and go out on their own to seek a deeper understanding of who they are and who God is, each of us in a small kind of way are being forced to a place of isolation at the moment. So there is an invitation, in a weird way, there is an invitation for us to take that difficult path of introspection with God, we don't have to go and sit on top of a pillar for 30 years, but we can actually, in those moments, maybe redemptively use them to seek God directly and say, God, you know, who are you? And because who I understand you to be tells me who I am.
Yeah, we can creatively use the space and even the confinement we have to encounter God in new ways if we reframe things a little bit. Because, I mean, there's so many negatives in the situation, but one positive for many of us is that we've got time to do things that we never have time, or time to think in ways that we never normally have time to, or time to be with people in a way that we never normally have time to. And we should take advantage of that and miss the genuine horribleness that there's around it.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate your thoughts. That's going to help a lot of people.